Hey everybody, welcome to another IAIB Spotlight presented to you by the International Association of Internet Broadcasters. I'm Andrew Zarian, and this week we have a really special guest. Vance Willis from StudioTech.tv is here with us. Actually, not in studio this week, but in a far, far, far away place called North Carolina, right?
That is correct. Hey, I'm glad to be here. And Andrew, thanks a lot for inviting me. Yep, I'm in just outside of Raleigh, capital city here in North Carolina.
You know, everything I learned about the Carolinas and the Mid-Atlantic area is from pro wrestling.
Oh.
Growing up. That's
Okay.
how I learned everything about Greensboro and Raleigh and everything. I was telling Mike, because Mike Phillips is also from the area. Mm-hmm. And I shot up some like locations to him, and he goes, "How do you know those?" I'm like, "Oh, pro wrestling."
Oh, wow.
So
yeah. I was not into it as a kid, but a lot of my friends were, but I was not. But yeah, Greensboro is a couple, hour and a half away, and Raleigh's about 20 miles. Mike Phillips is actually about 35 miles away from me. So I'm on the north side of Raleigh.
Yeah, that was when I heard that. When I heard that, I found it very interesting because here in New York, I'm sure there's a lot of people doing podcasts, but it's very rare that you find someone that's doing video and audio to the level that you guys do. I mean, Mike does a great job, and you do a great job with TTFN and with Studio
right.
Tech. And I want to go down how you got started in this, because you don't have a radio background, do you?
Not at all.
So how did you fall into this?
In fact, it is really just a falling into it, but it's also kind of become a little bit of a passion and a hobby out of control is the best way I can explain it. A lot of people ask, why do you do that? And I flip the coin around and I say, well, why do you watch football? or why do you like NASCAR? Or why do you like pro wrestling? Or why do you like these things? And obviously it's a pastime. It's things that you would like to do. To me, I've always been very passionate about gaining knowledge, about learning how things work. I mean, I was the kid that would take anything apart. Christmas time was great, but I would get the stuff. I might play with it or whatever, and of course, it was generally something electronics or whatever. But sure. Whatever it was, it could have been a bicycle. I went through a period in my life that I was really into bicycles, BMX. Before BMX was ever an X game, was ever a sport. So I could take a bicycle apart, put it back together, and assemble other stuff on it. I mean, just like a flash of a light. So I like the way I like to find out how things work, mm-hmm. and to solve problems. And I just love gaining knowledge. So a lot of those things together, my pastimes involve things that lean towards technology, but also expand the mind instead of, I don't want to, categorize things, but I don't like to spend time on things that do not expand my knowledge. I guess that's the best thing.
And you're a tech enthusiast. I mean, you're very much involved in technology and gadgets, and were you like that growing up? Were you like that as a kid?
I really was, and the way I got that, and that's where some of the similarities to Mike Phillips, and I was really chuckling, when I saw you do that interview with Mike, is that my father was heavy into electronics growing up, and obviously I know all of us, get things from our parents.
Sure.
And my father was he had a real time, full-time job. But he also had a television repair business that was kind of on the side, but it was also supplemental income for the family, so it let us, take vacations and trips and do camping and, go to the lakes and that kind of stuff.
And we're talking, I mean, now TV repair, they just replace it. I mean, you're talking about intricate, soldering and fixing things that are actually broken.
Exactly. So, my early years were actually, I mean, I learned how to solder. That's exactly right. I learned how to solder when I was probably maybe five or six. I mean, I was tinning wires. I was, installing resistors and circuit boards. And that's exactly right. At that point, you had a gigantic box that was a piece of furniture that had a tube in the front, and there were actually tubes on the inside that the elements or the items inside were user replaceable.
Yeah.
So, so people would bring over in a pickup truck or an old El Camino or something, bring over this gigantic appliance, and have to hand cart it or ramp it down off the vehicle. And then all of a sudden, every evening when he got home from his real job, that's what he would do, is kind of go down into the basement and flip on all the fluorescent lights and start doing that. He was also a ham operator. So,
okay.
So he was communicating. So I was involved with communication of what we know today, talking to people overseas via ham radio. I was involved with that at a very young age, along with being inside of the back of a television.
And you may say, some people may say that was the birth of, internet broadcasting. It's a very similar concept from the beginnings of ham radio, and still what people do with ham radio. I think George Norrie for years did a ham radio version of his show.
Sure.
Of coast to coast. So ham radio kind of was this amateur radio style, this that pioneered internet broadcasting in a sense.
Exactly. And, and at the time it was really, really cool to be able to have, a handheld, of course, to a kid, it's like a walkie-talkie, but to have a real FCC licensed device that, with touchpad, on it, and you would dial somebody's home phone. And that person is picking up their home phone at their end, and you're talking to them on a walkie-talkie. That was way before cell phones. That was way before direct communication. I mean, it was not the old Ma Bell, putting, quarter-inch jacks in and connecting the small towns together. But, we could literally be on a vacation or out. And, of course, I used to go to Ham Fest a lot. So, all these little gadget fairs that now have turned into maker fairs where people are, now doing 3D printers and, modeling stuff and everything, which I still love to go to these things. They're just, they're in larger cities, like New York. And so I have to kind of go there. But, and that kind of stuff was very influential in my life in the early years. And I just became passionate about how things work. So, we take the back off of a television, start troubleshooting it. Hey, no screen. Let's check the power supply. We got power. We got, we got something lighting up on the inside. Let's go to the next, so that's kind of how it evolved. I never, like you say, as we at our generation, go through school, we had Apple IIe computers, and I took computer classes when that was just the absolute geekiest thing to do, where, some folks were out playing football and, so those things kind of influenced
where you were going with this,
where my passions are now, more of what I like doing. And, and the bottom line is that, I feel like a lot of those things have allowed me to get to a point in my life, even at a somewhat young age. Some people may disagree with that, but that I can kind of do what I want to do. And, and that's just something that I enjoy doing.
Sure.
Is communicating. So, and using the technology, the gadgets and stuff.
Were you a fan of radio, traditional radio growing up? Is that something that you always thought about? You mentioned your father was a ham radio operator, but you grew up on radio.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, certainly. In fact, I mean, music is another very large passion of mine. I mean, I was out last night and saw, an opening act, that opens for Zach Brown, and it was a little club, just a great music venue. But I certainly love the radio and everything about the radio. And I would do the same thing that you've mentioned, call into the radio shows, as a kid and, and have those things, I literally, this is a true story, had a Mr. Microphone and I had plans to rewire the Mr. Microphone, which essentially was an FM transmitter, right? It would be a wireless mic that would transmit to an FM radio. You would tune in the FM radio to whatever it was, 88, 87.9 or something. I forgot, somewhere way low on the FM scale. You would tune it in. And you would use that microphone to communicate. And the wheels start spinning in my mind, and I'm like, how can I put an amplifier on this thing to be able to talk to the friends in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
That type stuff. So, it was more, I was just, wanting to do that in my mind. But, so yeah, I was certainly a big radio guy, not from an involvement. I did some internship with North Carolina State, the college radio, early years, but it was just some minor stuff. Didn't do a whole lot. Didn't ever get into the DJ side of it, or even the design side of the radio station like Mike Phillips did because of his father. So I didn't get that far involved with it, and just kind of followed other career paths that looking back were some good decisions at the time. I think it's like everybody else. Is this the right decision to make or not? And it's taken me on kind of a strange journey, but it's been a good one. But at the heart of it all is technology. I'm a gadget freak. I love technology, and just love to gain knowledge about everything. And the cutting edge stuff is generally where the knowledge is. Whether it's electronics or whether it's things happening in the medical field. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on in the world around us.
Oh
now.
no, and it's totally changing. I mean, every couple months, there's a breakthrough in all types of technology. You're talking about, the nanotech that's really developing now, and that's really changing how electronics are kind of made at this point. If you look down to it, especially in the medical field, there's a lot happening. So your background is not radio. You're a tech enthusiast. So how do you make this leap? So when do you first attempt to do a podcast or an internet broadcast?
Well, and this is another interesting connection. Obviously being, we're the East Coast version of Silicon Valley. We, right around the central part of North Carolina. It's a, large college sports area with, having Duke, a lot of smart folks, UNC, NC State, but we're also kind of a technology hub. We have a large IBM, center, and Research Triangle Park is about 30 minutes away from me. So the things that Mike Phillips talked about, way back in '93 when Amnon Nissan was doing stuff in this area, I would see him at Hamfest or computer shows or that kind of stuff. I was on Amnon's show back in '95 talking about the release of Windows 95. I mean, I was a beta tester for Windows 95, and it was, a big deal because
it was groundbreaking.
Yeah. You had DOS, you were doing command line stuff, and all of a sudden, obviously, there was the Mac operating system that was a GUI, but on the Windows side, it was a really big deal. So those type things, I've always just kind of, touched at and been right at an arm's length to technology. That's how I met Amnon. And didn't stay in contact with him through the 90s and 2000s, and then they've been running their internet show there at Computers 2K now for a long time. 4 or 5 hour show every Sunday. About that. You're a guest on and call in, and sometimes
I call in every Sunday at this point. I get up and that's the first thing I turn on.
Right. And my time on the weekends gets pulled, especially in the summer, because we have a lot of activity. We're kind of the Kool-Aid house, so we have a lot of stuff that goes on in the weekends with a lot of friends that come over and stuff. So we prepare for that. And unfortunately, I can't catch it as much in the summer as I can when it's cold outside. But yeah, so that kind of that was a little bit of a pull there. But so being kind of in a technology mecca has been pretty nice. Now it's certainly not, it's not San Francisco. This is not the Bay Area. We're not talking about, having Apple down the street and, all of that. But it has been influential to allow me to be able to have the ability for close contacts to very smart people that are involved with technology in Research Triangle Park and around some of the larger universities that we have here. So, that's kind of the thing. But actually, fast forwarding to internet broadcasting, it really was kind of a bug that bit me that, I've always enjoyed Leo Laporte.
Sure.
Watched him back in Tech TV days, and and then when that got pulled, and because it was obviously it needed to be run like a business, and if the business wasn't making money, then it got pulled. but I enjoyed learning that stuff because there again, it gets back to expanding my mind. So, liking that stuff, I watched it. So I always thought it was really cool for, when he and Patrick Norton were standing around and, doing that stuff. So between, Amnon and Leo and some of that stuff, I've always been pretty close by. But a buddy of mine came up and brought a TriCaster and showed me what you could do with this little teeny box that was essentially in a shuttle.
In a shuttle,
it was a very small one. It was a 300, and I was blown away. I said, I cannot believe that with this one box you can plug this stuff in, and bam, you got a television station.
And how long ago was this?
Oh, this was 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And just kind of flirting with that, he called me up. He says, hey, I'm going to fly out to San Francisco, and I'm going to do a lighting seminar. And a buddy of mine does this, and he's been traditionally doing it and going to tape, video to tape, and then he'll upload it to YouTube, and then, and he makes these tapes professionally and then sells them like, somebody writing a book and publishing it and selling it. He says, I've got an idea where I'd like to take the TriCaster, and I would like to do some of his lighting seminars. And I mean, this guy lights, big studio sets. I mean, full on movie production sets. And he said, I've got an idea that I'd just like to go take the TriCaster, set up a couple of cameras, and and stream it live, record it to the TriCaster, edit it real time, and have a production of the seminar that he can do something with. Would you like to just go hang out and give me a hand, run a camera?
What did you think the quality of the TriCaster would be before trying it?
Oh, I didn't even really kind of grasp at first what the TriCaster and what switching was. I mean, all of us grew up listening to radio and watching television, but unless you're in the radio business, you don't know what the heck a cart is, and you don't know that people would pull advertisements, and they would pull different little clips of music and slide them into something that looked like an 8-track, and they would have to have it loaded up and queued up and all this other stuff. So you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, and it didn't really click initially. I mean, he told me about it and explained it to me, and I was just like, I mean, I'm getting it, but it's just like not a eureka type moment until you actually see everything that happens. And then all of a sudden you start reverse engineering or backing into watching what's going on, whether you're watching, CNN or ABC or any other production now. I can see what they're doing, with tickers and with lower thirds and with bugs and everything that you certainly can do with software like VidBlaster or Wirecast or anything else. So, so it was kind of it was just like a light bulb. And I said, if television is going to go the same way that radio did, and and radio DJs are getting pushed out because revenues are going down, people are, like you mentioned, are listening to radio or music. I guess they're listening to music differently, and it changes all the time, whether it's Stitcher, whether it's Pandora, whether it's streamed from iTunes or whatever. The dynamics of music are changing so much. So the radio industry is in a tailspin. They don't know what to do.
Oh, it's been a total tailspin. I think the last, let's say 7 years have been this scramble to kind of figure out what to do. And they really have not done a good job at that, because you have services, I think the biggest threat for radio for many years was satellite radio, and they did not expect the internet to become this dominant player in the game.
Exactly. And so that's the eureka moment for me on the video side was, I wonder if what we're seeing looking into the future, into the crystal ball that none of us have, if this is actually going to take hold, because now, just like you were saying with your DSL line, now into a home studio, you can bring in incredible amounts of bandwidth like you're getting now. And if you've got the equipment, you can be anything that a television station was 15 years ago.
Yeah, and you could come very, very close to now. I mean, it's amazing how close you could come. I mean, you're sending HD video and You guys at Studio Tech, you guys do really high-end audio and video. And you think about, what were you capable of doing 10 years ago? And what are you capable of doing now? The technology for internet broadcasting has, just shifted and accelerated tremendously over the last 5 years. And I think, New Tech and products like New Tech Stricaster and Wirecast and VidBlasters have really been the driving force behind this.
Right.
You use a TriCaster almost every day for your broadcast, right?
Right. Yeah. I have a TriCaster 850, but a lot of people say, well, why go that route? That's probably a big question that we get. Why go to a hardware switcher? And you're exactly right. My influence was that's what I saw work, and I saw some really cool stuff. So seeing that, even though it was a smaller box, it was a 300, it was a high def TriCaster, but seeing what you could do with that, then I said, wow, let me grab. I've got the camera I'm on right now is a camera that I purchased. It was a $1,400 high def Canon Vixia camera. An HFS 10 that I just got for family vacations and just using to capture some high def stuff onto an SD card. So I said, let me grab that and let me download Wirecast, because Wirecast has a demo version, right?
Sure.
So then you get that and plug it into Wirecast. You're like, oh, that's really cool. So then, hey, I need another camera, So then you go and you get another camera, and all of a sudden you say, well, I got a couple of webcams, and so it's kind of unfortunately a lot of things in my life morph into out of controlness, and it's just a personality trait.
Yeah.
That, hey, it's you're only on the earth for a certain number of years, so I like to enjoy life, and so it has gone extreme. It's gone to up to 22 monitors in the studio. And, at one time I had, 6 high def cameras, and, I've eased off a little bit of that, because what I've found is that if you get so much stuff, even though my mind works and I'm a very good multitasker and I can do a lot of stuff at once, that you try to integrate all of this stuff together, and one thing fails in the chain, and you're kind of screwed.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah, it is. So all of a sudden, Mark Johnson laughs at me all the time because I don't like to turn stuff off. You got the whole green movement. And you're like, hey, worried about what your new iMac is going to be using in electricity use and Energy Star compliance and all this other stuff. And here I have 22 monitors that stay on all the time with a TriCaster that runs all the time with fans blowing and all this stuff. But it's not that, I'm certainly concerned about all of that and the energy use as well. But if the domino comes out of the chain, then all of a sudden, why did monitor number 4, why is it not showing the same image that it should be on monitor number 1? That's mirrored over to another one. And the reason is that when you reboot things, the video card, it has to negotiate with HDMI cables, and things have to work in a sequence. And so anyway, so you get the point. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. When I was on your show, you did a studio tour, and I have to tell you, it's insane the amount of equipment you have. It's so much equipment. How did you build that up? How did you start? At one point you probably said, okay, I'm going to get into this seriously and I'm going to buy some serious gear. How did you make that jump from, hooking up a couple cameras to Wirecast to, really going at it with a full-fledged studio?
It was a progression, but a fast progression. I've been building for 8 months, a year or so, and get a lot of comments about how messy the wiring is. I can tell you right now, I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff of a lot of studios, and even have some on tape myself or recorded. And there's a lot of messy stuff. There are a lot of neat freaks and everything else. But I added a piece and a piece and a piece, and tried things out and said, well, will this work? And one of the most frustrating things to me about trying to put these bits and pieces together has been the problems that you incur by just saying, oh, well, this device has an HDMI out and this device has an HDMI in. Let's connect them together and everything will work because they both have HDMI. And that's not the case, guys. It's not. So, if you try to multiply, for instance, an HDMI signal by coming out of one and going into 4, there's a good chance it's not going to work because
Yeah.
that main driving device doesn't have enough oomph to, to make those other things work. So, you think, well, why would the manufacturer make this to distribute 4 HDMI signals? It's a lot of stuff. So, so it was a piece by piece ad.
A lot of trial and error, a lot of wasted
trial and error,
wasted money on equipment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there has been some waste of money and equipment. There has been, and there's been some decisions because, another question that we get is how do we end up with a massive, a production piece of equipment like the NewTek TriCaster that literally is used by large, television stations or news sports affiliates, news affiliates, as not their mobile satellite truck, but they use it as a backup, and sometimes they do use TriCasters as a second, third screen device. And the answer to that question is as simple as making the progression from each thing, trying to make things operate and running into those roadblocks that we talked about, not being able to connect the HDMI in to an HDMI out and it just work.
I mean, you're bringing up an example that I'm battling right now. We recently went high def in the studio where we're doing all our video in high def, and we're changing the way that we do our Skype video. And we're running one Skype video via HDMI from a gateway computer we have here. And I have a laptop here that does HDMI out. I have a Blackmagic Intensity Pro that does HDMI in. When you pop that in, guess what? It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because the video card on this does not allow you to output the video to a capture card because of HSCP.
HDCP. Yeah. HDCP. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then you start learning about that stuff.
Yeah. And most people think, well, you just pop it in and it works, but it's not the case.
Yeah. It is very frustrating, Like I say, you got an HDMI cable, you plug it in, you think it's going to work, and all of a sudden you got a black screen on the other end. You're like, why do I have a black screen? And then all of a sudden you say, yeah, well, it's an HDCP copyright issue because inside of that HDMI agreement, they have to block content so you can't copy it digitally because you're sending ones and zeros down that HDMI cable.
One of the questions that we get all the time at the IAIB is, well, what should I do? Should I start small and build up, or should I just take the leap? And I don't think either of those choices is the right option. One mistake that we made, and you took the leap, what we did for a couple of years is constantly build up. So we went from, 640 by 480, 640 by 360. Then we went to 480p, and then now we've gone to HD. But in between those, we've added, more computers, upgraded hardware, built new systems. Every 6 months, we were building a new system. We went from analog cables to digital cables and back down to analog cables. So we've tested so many different options because we built slowly. And I was doing the math a couple of weeks ago on how much money we wasted on hardware we're no longer using. My attic is filled with cameras and just stacks of computers, quad-core AMD computers. I probably have 5 quad-core AMD computers there and probably 4 laptops that we're not using. Wow. And you think about the money that you spent on those things.
Yeah.
Where, now they're sitting in an attic, you could always sell them, but I mean, that's a hassle. I don't want to start selling merchandise, my old hardware out there. So you're thinking, what's the other option? And something like the TriCaster, you don't need to get the highest end one current, that they offer, but you could get something and it works right out of the box.
Right.
How was the learning curve for you to learn how to manage this TriCaster? Because there's not too many people that you could call up and be like, hey, how do you use this thing?
It's the learning curve is a learning curve. It's not as much of a learning curve for someone that is in the TV world. If you're a technical director or you're coming from, I think you guys have talked about how the radio world, some of the DJs and even radio engineers for stations got kind of pushed out because of the economies of their profession. So those people migrating over to say do a podcast with a microphone and upload it to get it on iTunes and all that stuff is a very smooth transition. Where I would think that the exact same thing would be true for, let's say, a TV studio professional to get pushed out if CNN's revenues go down and they say, well, I don't have a job anymore, so I would like to to do this internet video stuff. And, that way they would say, oh, well, I know what take is, and I know what auto is, and I know what transitions are and lower thirds and how layers work in video and that kind of stuff. But not coming from that world, not being involved in that as a profession, it's a big learning curve. I mean, you just don't know these things.
Well, and you're right. That's one of the things that has plagued a lot of these, big time radio guys, because they have all these people doing it for them. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a very difficult thing, but if you're coming from TV or you're coming from the production side, this is an easy transition for you.
Right. And, and I try to be humble about my knowledge, because I'll be the first to say that, hey, if I don't know, I don't know. And there's a reason, because I haven't needed to know or experience that. And I don't try to put on any fronts about saying, oh, well, whatever. But I've had to get that knowledge of the TriCaster through trial and error, just like building the studio through trial and error.
And that's the key to learning. That's the key to learning. I mean, one of our viewers, and we share the same viewer, Jodamax, in our chat room. He's a young guy, and the amount of knowledge that he has on this stuff is it's unbelievable. And just the other day, he was one of the people that helped set up the HD setup, and I was amazed, and I learned it. I could have been narrow-minded and said, oh, well, what do you know? But that's not the case with this stuff, because there's always someone that knows something more than you, and there's always going to be someone that knows that little tip that's going to help your setup tremendously.
I mean, Mike's big tip in audio is ground loop isolators. I mean, a lot of people just don't get why they have buzzes and hums and that kind of stuff. And generally, it's because of potential ground differences in devices. And it can be a monitor that you plug into an HDMI. The HDMI cable, guys, it has, a shield on it. It has metal. You plug in a monitor, and all of a sudden, you've got a ground loop, then you've got to drill down. All of a sudden you unplug the monitor and your ground loop goes away. Well, why did the monitor? I'm not even running audio to the monitor. I'm just sending video to it, because it ties into the chassis earth ground of the devices that are in the chain. And it's all of that stuff.
And that's something that radio stations really don't battle. That's not, they're not worrying about if their computer is going to cause a ground loop issue. Right, but that's one of the biggest problems.
They might have, though, Andrew, and they might have that engineer on the radio side that says, like Mike, that would say, oh, well, that's that.
I should take that back.
As a ground loop. Right.
Yeah, they know how to fix it. That's what it is.
There you go. They have a paid person that it's their job to fix that problem, where you and I, may just be like, oh, what's going on? I plugged it in and it hums, it buzzes. So,
one of the biggest problems I've seen, this is one of the things that plagues internet broadcasters, is a ground loop problem. And I cannot tell you, I would say more people have a ground loop issue than people that don't.
I agree.
When I listen to podcasts, I mean, there are a lot of guys like you guys and, what Twit's doing, they know how to correct it, but there's many people that don't. And I cannot tell you how many people I listen to, how many shows I put on, and there's this awful buzz coming in through the audio. And you think, why do they not hear it? And I'm sure they do that, but they just don't know how to fix it. One of the things that I attribute this to, and I've had this discussion with Mike Phillips, and we've gone back and forth on it. I don't necessarily think he agrees with me on this, but I think USB mixers are notorious for ground loop issues. I mean, they're awful, because it matters, it depends on the ground on the board or how the wiring is done on the computer. But I cannot tell you how many people have done, or podcasts that I know of, that use USB mixers, and they have awful, awful ground loop issues.
Well, think about that. And it's the same thing as the HDMI cable I just mentioned. And the reason I mentioned HDMI cable is because that's something that people would not contribute, or they would not attribute that to causing a problem. But that same USB mixer that you're talking about, what does a USB cable got on the outside of it? It's got a metal shield that when you plug it in, you are grounding the device that is your computer on one end, because the little flat part of the USB obviously is metal on the outside. It's plugging into the motherboard or whatever of the computer. You're going over to the mixer. You're plugging in on the B USB side, but it's still got metal around it. And all of a sudden, you have just linked that USB mixer to that computer. Both of the chassis grounds and the power supplies, if they're plugged into two different electric services, then you've created a ground potential between those two. And what you get is you're hearing some oscillation of electricity going between the two devices, and just tying them together does it. So, when you plug in an RCA jack, it's analog audio. You've got metal around the outside on the shield going back. You're connecting them together. HDMI cable, same thing. SDI cables, all of these things can cause ground loop issues, and they will really make you just go insane. And the more parts that you add, like we're talking about, I think that most people will start off small and then build. My progression from starting off small and getting to, gigantic in the studio was pretty quick in 8 or 9 months. And obviously I've been very thankful that I've had some toy money or play money to support my, the hobby, because it is a very, very expensive hobby.
It's a very expensive hobby.
The same guy, Ray Kronice, that showed me the TriCaster to begin with, he warned me from the very beginning. He said, I know your personality. I'm a lot like he is, but he said, let me tell you that you cannot tame this tiger. You cannot get on top of having enough money to get to where there's always going to be something
that you need
better, that you need, that is a bigger monitor, an SDI monitor instead of a consumer grade monitor, or a professional camera that'll have a little bit higher resolution, or better zoom rates. I mean, all of that stuff. And he warned me right from the beginning. If start off small, and back to your question that you get a lot. Do you start off small? Do you get VidBlaster and Wirecast and 1 or 2 cameras, and use webcams? I think the answer to that is certainly yes. See if you like it. There's a lot of people that do pod, that pod fade out. I think that's normal. Can everyone be as successful business person as you and the GFQ network? I don't think so, because it is still in its infancy, and people are just kind of scared about this stuff. They don't understand, what is this internet broadcasting stuff? We've heard about podcast, and and some people, there are a lot of people that don't even know what a podcast is, that don't expand their mind and listen to stuff when they're driving. They may just turn on the country station or the rock and roll station,
and that's it. That's all they know.
And that's it. Yeah. Right. And, and watch football on Sundays and listen to the radio on the way to work and go to their cubicle. And that's all fine. If that's what makes them happy, that's fine. So it's interesting dynamics. And I think that things are changing so rapidly in our world here of video production that I do believe that there will be micro areas, micro communities of people that will be broadcasting their passion. And it doesn't really matter what their passion is. Insert anything. But they will be sharing their passion with others like them in the community. And the community can be worldwide, or the community can be very narrow. It could be as simple as going to a kid's soccer game and wanting to share the broadcast of that kid's soccer game with a relative that is across the world, and do it with a handheld camera with a device on the top and a $50 or less account that they can stream high def to. Which
it's mind blowing. I mean, and this is, again,
it is amazing.
It's the infancy of this technology. I mean, if you look at what we're doing, it's just getting there now because of bandwidth speeds and the improvement of, consumer grade cameras. You brought up your father being involved in ham radio. My father, I come from a mechanics. My dad was a mechanic, and I grew up in that gearhead type family. So I could tear apart an engine and rebuild a transmission. But I was the same way with computers. I would tear apart a computer, and when I was probably 4 years old, my father bought a computer, and he put it in my bedroom, and he said, "Now learn this." And I turned it on. I learned everything on my own. I tore it apart. I mean, I built it, but it's things like that. If you look at but what I was trying to say was, my father had a big camera. I mean, he had one of these like big ones, a shoulder mount cameras. Yeah. When I was a kid.
Was it like a VHS, or was it all the way back to the 8mm days?
It was VHS.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was a VHS one. I think he spent like $1,300 on this thing.
Oh yeah.
And I was just so awed by this device. It was this big camera with a big lens on there. You had to put it on your shoulder to use, and I mean, it was, and the viewfinder was black and white. I remember that. and I still have it. I think it's a JVC. It's in my attic somewhere. And I was just so awed by this camera. I was just so amazed by it. And you look at where the technology has gone in the last 28 years. Let's say 20 years with consumer-grade quality. There was no way you could do anything to the level that we're doing with a consumer-grade product 20 years ago.
That's exactly right.
And now we're able to nearly replicate what we see on television at a fraction of the cost. I mean, Vance, if you went and got, let's say, instead of having a $1,200 camera, you went and spent another $1,000 and got a $2,200 camera, I guarantee you there would be nobody could tell the difference in the video quality between you and a professional, I'm talking professional quality video.
That's a perfect example. I agree with you completely.
And that's a tiny budget.
As small as a C910 or 920 from Logitech webcam has higher resolution than we would watch from network television just a few years ago. And you look at one of these guys, this has got HDMI out. You can actually take the size of something that's smaller than a deck of cards and get high definition video in real time or recorded and put it in a shirt pocket.
What camera is that?
Well, it's the GoPro. It's the Hero 2.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the GoPro Hero 2. I mean, it's thicker because I have, battery and the Wi-Fi pack on the back. But that's exactly what you're saying. That camera that your father had, that was a JVC, that was the VHS that's put on your shoulder. And I remember because my father had one too. And it would actually, it would tire you. If you were going to take, 10 minutes of video, you would be like, hey, somebody take this thing. It's too heavy, even though it's set on your shoulder. Things like this blow it away. And of course, I know, we get the whole Moore's law and all the stuff of doubling and shrinking and all that stuff. But it's just, to me, is amazing what you can do with stuff that is coming out in technology today, all the way through, science, electronics, medical, everything. I'm just blown away by it.
Now, let me ask you, you're a guy that has a lot of hardware there. You've learned a lot. I'm sure you've made a couple mistakes here and there. What are some of the mistakes that you've made that you could change if you could go back? I mean, one of the things that I would have done is not buy as much equipment as I did and just taken the leap, gotten one big product for that price.
Right.
Maybe I should have just gotten a TriCaster at the time when I was buying, 3-4 computers trying to route everything for a different system.
Well, I think that's a normal progression. Like I said, I mean, Mark and I get that question a lot. How did you arrive at the TriCaster? And other than that was what I was first amazed by in doing this stuff. Mark actually could speak better about it, but I was building parts and pieces together. Trying to do the Wirecast route, the VidBlaster route, the 1 or 2 camera route, and I could never quite get to where it was. But there again, I mean, look, for most everyone involved with this, it's a financial decision as well. I mean, you have to make sense about this. Do you go buy $100,000 automobile to drive to work when an $8,000 vehicle will do the exact same thing? I mean, it's a larger scale, but the end game is point A to point B quickly, and if you're in a large city, you may not even need an automobile. But the bottom line is that you could do it small scale. What we've seen is that people that get into either catch the bug or get into the technology a lot, they end up parting and piecing together things that ends up costing as much money as if you would have taken the leap. I took the leap initially after I did the software version of the switchers. I did go to the 300 and loved that HD unit, very small. Take it, disconnect the wires, and you could almost throw it in a backpack. Not quite, but almost. And I just didn't have enough inputs. I started, growing more. I said, hey, I like having a camera in the front, a camera on the side, and one over top. So when I'm talking about something, I like to be able to flip to that camera.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? 3 cameras and all of your inputs are taken up on that version of the TriCaster.
So
and
now
I said,
it's time. Yeah.
How do I show a website? How do I show a website? Well, like you'll do desktop presenter, or not desktop presenter, but you'll do a screen grab, and you'll be able to take that in as an input. And if you have enough modules inside of VidBlaster, you either buy more or do it on the software side. And then your concerns are just like it was before we started today. How's my CPU? How's my processor working? So the thing about NewTek and the TriCaster and a number of the other ones, Broadcast Picks, there's a number of hardware video switchers that do this. They have optimized the processing power, both with RAM and the CPU and all of the parts and pieces inside of these boxes to go just full tilt, wide open, and process this stuff as efficient as possible without you having to worry about where's my CPU usage, where's my RAM, am I trying to do too much stuff with this screen grab, that kind of stuff. So if you've got 8 inputs and you've got a couple of virtual inputs, then you can load that sucker down and and go with a full production, do the switching, add the graphics, the lower thirds, play the videos, that kind of stuff. You still have issues. I mean, come on, all of us have issues between, Mac video formats, on the .mov packaging and Windows MPGs and not wanting to play. And I mean, and I've struggled with a number of those as well as hardware issues. Sure. As far as a mistake, I mean, I certainly have purchased some pieces that didn't work. That's been the most frustrating thing, probably, Andrew, is just thinking that, pulling something up on a website and saying, oh, that'll solve my problem. And you order it, and then, it comes in, and it could be a $15 device, or it could be a $1,500 device. And all of a sudden, it doesn't do what you need it to do. And, so that's actually one of the kind of, the way we kind of, birthed, if you will, Studio Tech, was that, we had a community of people that were doing the same thing. That's the way I met Mark Johnson. Was, I found him on YouTube, watched a video, and I'm like, and I called him up and said, hey, I think what you're doing is awesome, and I'm having some issues too, and and we were kind of we were progressing at the same technology speed as far as grasping and solving the problems, and it's almost like you kind of you want to help the other one out, but also the people in the industry. So, just like Joe, like you said, Joe DeMax, he soaks the knowledge up like a sponge, and he's a go-to guy about a lot of stuff. He spends more time probably than anyone I know of. Seriously. I mean, you can go back, you can go to Leo Laporte. Leo says right off the bat, hey, I could do this inside of an upstairs room in a house with an analog mixer and this stuff. But when it got outside of that, he said, I got to bring somebody in. I got to bring in a studio engineer. I have to bring in that studio that's problem solved.
I've actually brought Joe in as a part-time guy now, where every couple of weeks I have him do like some big project and we work on it, and I hire him that way because I can't do it anymore.
Right.
Because we have multiple aspects. We have GFQ and of course the IAIB. And I have Suncast that does a lot, all our production. We manage a web company, so there's a lot happening, and I can't sit here and advertising. I have to get ads. I mean, you
gotta make money.
I gotta make money.
You gotta be able to make money. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, so we have a part-time sales guy. We have Joe doing a lot of the streaming stuff. We have Suncast as the productions guy. And there's multiple aspects. My wife does the PR, so it's a full-fledged business at this point. But I wish I could sit here and just decide which cable works the best and what microphone works the best. I mean, a lot of times I got to leave it up to the staff to say, okay, make this call. Do you think this is a good call? One thing we've been doing is, we converted to high definition, so we have to change the way we encode video.
Sure.
All that changes. The codecs that we use, all that stuff changes. So at this point, I'm like, you got to make the decision. I can't do it. There's so much, so you have to relinquish a lot of these things in order to kind of
you do have to delegate. That's a good point. A lot of people don't realize that just making that decision where you say, I would like to have the video that I produce look better on somebody's 27-inch iMac or 30-inch, Dell monitor on their PC while they're watching my video podcast. And just by making that one decision that you just talked about, you all of a sudden go from file sizes that grow, I mean, just exponentially larger than the standard definition one. Well, then once you've got that file size, how do you manage, like you said, the codecs? How do you shrink that down? Because a lot of places that you may post that or upload it, not only do you have storage issues there, they may not take it larger than a gig.
There's many variables that come into play. I mean, you also have to look at, who could view this?
Right.
Who's going to be able to view the feed? We offer a megabit feed for all of it, and I think most people can manage a megabit at this point. Most of our viewers, at least, where 6 months ago they couldn't. I think the technology has gotten better from the CDNs, but we still offer, a 500 kilobit feed for those people that can't view it. So you have to kind of put all these things, all these variables, and as an option in what you do and how you do it.
And something as simple as, hey, I'm gonna log in and check out the GFQ network, and I want to start this podcast, and all of a sudden, since I have another couple of businesses that are my real jobs, you get a fire call that you have to go out and go attend to something. I want to be able to grab my smartphone, my iPhone, or my iPad or whatever, and continue on. Just the transition between, getting it onto the smartphone to be able to take it with you mobily is another leap, So then you have to, do you have an iPhone app? Well, most people don't have an iPhone app. It costs a lot of money. But will your stream adapt to an iOS stream, or is it all flash? Will it only work on Android devices? Will it crash that device? There's so many things to have to worry about. And sometimes without having the support staff that you just mentioned. I mean, just like with Jessica helping you out do some stuff, my wife has her own career and her own job, and she doesn't care a hill of beans about the stuff that may be my hobbies and my passions. And it's not that she wouldn't do anything that I ask her to do. She's just not involved in that. So I think that people like you that have made this into a career and make it work. The wheels of the machine are very difficult to make happen, because there are just a lot of people that don't want to pay for advertising. We've become hey, this is a free society. I can go to YouTube and get this. Why am I gonna pay for cable? You said you're one of the first people with cable. Now a lot of people are cutting the cord and just going to download stuff on from YouTube.
I think it's a different way of thinking. I think the advertising model is totally shifting when it comes to the way you advertise on the internet. And I think a lot of the mistakes that internet broadcasts have done is set up the same model as radio and television.
You're right.
And it hasn't worked. And I'm not saying it's not going to work. I mean, we do a radio model, but it doesn't work for many advertisers because they're trying to, and most advertisers see it as, well, how many numbers do you have? How many people watch you? What's your demo? Okay, well, if you don't have 5 million people watching, we don't want to advertise. But that's not the case anymore, because someone like your show, for example, that deals with a very niche product and a niche issue that people face, but you could be extremely valuable to a company like, let's say, Blackmagic.
Right. And I think that that you and our show, you can influence that niche market big time. You're right. You may not get the 5 million, but I don't want the women that want to talk about health and beauty. It's completely different. That's a very good point. That radio could be hitting my wife or your wife in a commute, and it may have to appeal. The advertisement may have to appeal to her or to you and I, and we are very, very targeted. And that kind of gets back to that whole micro community that I was talking about, that I think that we will be a lot more targeted in what we want to watch. Like right now, there's 700 channels on cable.
Minus the Viacom stations for DirecTV.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's unfortunate.
So where do you see it headed? Where do you see this going in 5 years? Because you're someone that's far ahead of many internet broadcasters. You have the TriCaster, you have high-def cameras. So where do you see this going? Do you see it slowing down at any rate, or do you see that more it's going to be easier to achieve better video at a lower cost?
I definitely see that happening. I see that happening all around us right now. Everything that we're seeing, we went out to NAB this year, did some coverage of that, and everything we're seeing is shrinking in size, is getting better quality than was available 5 or 10 years ago, even all the way up to these gigantic cameras that were on big pedestal mounts in studios. I see everything shrinking. I see just the information that is communicated is going to be a lot more for everyone that has an interest or passion in anything. And whether that interest or passion is pro wrestling, is soccer with the kids, whether it's mechanics, like you say, somebody that wants to take an engine apart now can broadcast a show of engine rebuilding. I mean, whatever it is, I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see devices get small enough that you can transport them very easily, get very high quality audio, very high quality video, and more than likely be able to do full productions remotely at events or how-to scenarios. And I think it's going to be a really good thing for education, because I really feel like that people will get more educated the more they know about stuff. And I feel like that's what's going to happen. I mean, home and garden TV, HGTV, who would have ever thought 15 years ago when HGTV started that it would make a craze to where on every other corner in the country there's home improvement stores.
Yeah.
You've got Mrs. Smith at 25 years old installing her own ceiling fan now because she's watched HGTV, or she's doing a flower garden or a koi pond or whatever. I think all of those things that have now used to be, that have progressed into full video productions, audio and video productions, whether you go on the podcast side audio, you go to the video podcast side, or new media. I think those are going to all come into where there'll be a lot of niche markets that allow people that have passions or interest or desires to be able to get that information even more than they can now on 700 channels of television. So that's kind of where I see it going. I see it shrinking, and I see technology changing to where there's just going to be, it's going to be an incredible journey as long as innovation can continue to happen.
No, you're absolutely right.
Not be stifled. There's a real fine line. I was reading something the other day that said if we had the regulations, when penicillin was created, that it would have never been developed, because penicillin obviously can hurt or kill people because there are some people that are allergic to it, right?
Sure.
But on the flip side of that, how many lives have penicillin saved? So that's my only fear, is that regulations will stifle innovation, and that will kind of slow it down. I still think that technology will win out in the long run. I think the science and the people that are passionate about creating devices and things and getting to that new place, I think that'll still win out. But it really scares me how many things, you can't ride a bicycle now because you got to have a helmet because you might fall and crack your head open. Back in our day, we would ride a bicycle or a motorcycle or a dirt bike or whatever without a helmet. And sure, did some people get killed? Yeah, but so I just hope that innovation is not stifled too much.
I actually I read a very interesting article a while ago, and I spoke to the CEO of Stitcher Radio, which Stitcher, is one of the leading driving forces behind getting internet radio, talk radio in the car. And we were talking, and this was off the air, and I brought up the fact that what's going to happen when we get in the car, and he said, one thing that many people fear is that because now we're in the car and it's a free source, the FCC may try to regulate what is being broadcasted in the car via the internet. So, now you're talking about, FCC regulation of what you can and can't say. Now, I don't think that's going to apply to the masses, but I think in order to get some sort of FaceTime, there may be some sort of regulation to be in the car. And that's the biggest thing that I fear, is that they're going to follow the same model that they did with traditional radio and traditional broadcasting.
I do too.
That may go over to the internet, but is that necessarily a bad thing? Is some sort of structure a bad thing?
No, I don't think the structure is bad. But see, one of the things I enjoy about your network is that you can get what some people would consider, off color.
Sure.
You would get a little, there are, explicatives that fly out, okay, that you don't have to worry about, I mean, because there's not a regulation. And I like the ability for you to be able to do what you want to do. If I don't like you saying that 4-letter word as you're broadcasting, then I can just not watch your show.
Yeah.
But I seem to think that if you're passionate about something and that word fits what you're talking about, then I want to hear you say it, and that's so that's why I kind of dig that, I mean, are there extreme shock jocks? Yes. A lot of people hate Howard Stern. There's a lot of people that like Howard Stern. So, I like the openness of allowing, the market to decide, hey, I like the late night shows, or I just, that's my only thing about the whole thing. But I think you're right. I hope not, because I like satellite radio, and I like being able to tune into something, like Brushwood show, like NSFF,
sure.
And if you, NSFW, I'm sorry, but
no, when I started, one of the things I grew up, New York radio, Howard Stern, Opie and Anthony, Chauncey Hayden works for me, which was on the Howard Stern show for 18 years. It was a regular. So one of the things that I always said, and Howard, and I remember Howard saying this one day, a college radio kid called in and he goes, I love your show. I want to be just like you. And I got thrown off my college radio station, and he wanted, someone to say something. And right. Howard turned around and goes, you're an idiot. Why would you curse on the air? Why would you do what I'm doing? It took me 20 years to be able to do this. And it's not about the cursing. It's about telling the story. And that always stuck with me. And I always said, if you're going to curse, go ahead. I mean, I have a few words that, obviously we tell them, don't go there. But
right.
If you're going to curse, make it mean something. And don't replace the words and with an F word.
That's right.
And I think that's a mistake that many people do now, that because you can, you're going to do it.
Right.
And that's not the case. I think if you have some sort of self-regulation and you pull it back, you could tell the story and you can make it mean something when you finally do it. And you know what? I'm not going to sit there and curse on the tech show.
Right.
I mean, obviously, that's not the show for that. I'm not going to sit here on this show and curse on it. I think it's self-control and self-regulation that will lead to your success or downfall.
That's right. That's my point exactly, and I think you've got it. That you explained it perfectly right there. That's I couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly the way I feel about it. You're right.
We get a lot of emails from people that say, I normally wouldn't listen to this type of show, but when I normally don't like shows that curse, but when you do it, it doesn't feel like you're just doing it.
Right.
And listen, I mean, there are many people that don't like the shows that I do, but that's been one thing that I've always said. We want to offer a variety of content. We want to offer all types of different content. What I do on one show does not necessarily represent who I am on another show.
And you can never make everyone happy. That'll never happen at all. And there again, I think you'll be targeting the people that enjoy that type stuff. If they don't, they won't watch that show, or they'll tune away from your network and say, oh, Andrew's an idiot because all he does is curse. And which obviously I agree completely. Tell the story.
I get the Andrew's an idiot. I get the Andrew's an idiot even if I don't curse, Vance.
So do I. I get it too. So I get it too. But it is about the experience. I agree completely. People want to know about the experience. How did you get to a gigantic studio? How did you get? How did you make that transition from standard def to high def or whatever?
So before we wrap it up, tell me about Studio Tech. I know you have a show in about 45 minutes, right?
Right.
So tell me about Studio Tech. Tell me about what you guys do and where people could watch it.
Okay. So every Friday live at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. over in the UK, we do Studio Tech live. Studio Tech is a part of the TTFN network, and it kind of came about by our experience, Mark Johnson and I, the experience that we kind of wanted to bring to the masses to say, this is what we've done, the experience of things that we've tried that didn't work, that did work, and the cool stuff. Here are the gadgets. Here are the things that will help you in your journey, your quest to get to be an internet broadcaster, whether it's audio, whether it's, on the podcast side. We obviously do high def video, and we have gone all the way up through to the hardware switcher of the TriCaster, and we can do, graphics on board, and we've got, control surfaces and the whole shebang. We like to just share that experience with people. We have a Q&A show once a month that allows for people to log into the chat room, which we encourage, and just ask questions, and there are no dumb questions. The only dumb questions are the ones that don't get asked. I mean, even though it may have been a year before or even before that, if you've got a ground loop problem, hey, let's talk about it. Let's put you in contact with Mike. Mike can, in a short period of time help you out.
And you guys
so
did
that's what we do.
And you guys did some unbelievable giveaways a couple of weeks ago.
This entire summer we're doing giveaways of products. We've got some really nice ones coming up. We had a little bit of a break last week that we didn't. But coming up, we've got some really, really nice stuff that manufacturers like Blackmagic and a number of other manufacturers are sending us their product. We've either purchased it, reviewed their products, or whatever, have some use in the product. But it allows people that will log into the chat room, sign in, talk about this stuff, tweet about it, put it on Facebook, that kind of stuff, to have a chance to get to get some products. It could be a Wirecast copy, could be it could be VidBlaster, it could be a mini converter.
What's the website that you guys did it on? I'm trying to find some of the stuff you guys gave away.
It's I think it's at studiotech.tv /summer 2012 giveaway or something like that. It's a / off of
all right, summer 2012.
Yes, summer 2012. That's it.
So you guys gave away a copy of Wirecast, a copy of Telestream's episode,
right?
The Hyperdeck shuttle, which is a really, really awesome giveaway. Great recording for anybody that's looking to record video. The Intensity Extreme, another unbelievable product. You guys gave away. Have you given this away? The LED 160.
That's actually the 160 is today's is what we're announcing today for the giveaway on today's show. So I would encourage everyone to tune in. We're only running it through the summer. So we'll probably pull back and then pick back up later on with it. But it's it's a really cool thing. It involves the community in. It allows people to talk about stuff, and of course there's a little bit of competition. It's not like the Sunday afternoon football game, but it's a lot of competition that everyone wants to win.
Oh, and they're great stuff.
Heck, some of the stuff I'd like to win, but, so anyway, we're trying to keep all of that, completely ethical and, not do any funny stuff with it and, help the manufacturers out, help out our viewership, and also build the community so people can share their experiences. So you get people involved like you and Stephen Haywood and Joe DeMax and Mike Phillips and Amnon Nissan and Mark and myself, all of these people that, we touch in some way that, we want to help out. So that's what it's all about. Studiotech.tv. Fridays is live. And then of course you can always download the recorded episodes at other times. We do a couple of other shows, play around a little bit with a show called The Techies that's behind me. Mark and I do that, and we do record that and then upload it. Don't have a lot of time that I can allocate to it, so it's not really consistent, which I wish it would be, because we really enjoy doing it. But we just talk about gadgets and stuff. So anyway, but studiotech.tv and live on Fridays.
Very, very cool. Vance, I want to thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think what you guys do is amazing. And it's great to see what you have done. Now, you guys have a video of your studio if anybody wants to see it, because people are asking me, can we see your studio? You have a video up on the website, right, of your studio tour?
Yes. You can get to studiotech.tv and do a search there. It's about a month old. When you were on, you were on the episode. I
was on the episode
the day I played, And we also cut that off and put it on YouTube as well. So studiotech.tv, do a search for that. Studio tours. We did your studio tour that day. We did mine. There's been a number of other studio tours. I did the new the Twit Brick House tour. So, we would encourage anyone that has a studio. There again, it's just like a question. There's nothing wrong with. I see some really cool stuff on Twitter, from people saying, "Look, I just got this set up, and here's my 3 monitors and my analog mixer in the center and my new camera." That stuff's cool. Cliff Ravenscraft, he's got a great setup. All of this stuff is really neat. So anyone would be encouraged to share that stuff.
You could also follow Vance on Twitter at Vance Willis. If you miss any portion of the show, of course, you could go to our website, ibroadcastnetwork.org for the IAIB, or, of course, on our website, gfqnetwork.com. We should have the podcast version up within the day. It's taking a little longer now that we're doing HD for the encoding, but probably by tomorrow we should have it up. And, of course, we're replaying this all day at gfqlive.tv. Vance, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it, and definitely check out Studio Tech following this show in about 40 minutes. So stay tuned for that.
There you go. And Andrew, I wanted to say thanks. I want to say thanks for everything you do. Love all the shows you've got, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Vance.
I really appreciated the invitation to come on today. So thanks.
Anytime. I'd love to do it again. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff.
Right.
Only if we had time. But we got to wrap it up for today. So we'll see you all next week on the IAIB Spotlight. Good night, everybody.